oh, you have company over, you better make it look like it's spotless and then make it look like it was so effortless too.
Right? Or like make it look like nobody lives here.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
Hola, mi gente. Welcome back to Latina ADHD, where we talk about what it's like to live with ADHD within a culture, families, and everyday life. I'm Dr. Janice Castro, a licensed psychologist, here to help us all feel a little more seen, a little less alone. As always, a gentle reminder this podcast and this episode, it's not a replacement for therapy, but I hope it offers you some insight, validation, or even just a moment to exhale. Today's episode is called Success, but at what cost? And I am so excited to introduce our guest, Dr. Yvette Martinez-Vu. Dr. Yvette Martinez-Vu is a grad school and productivity certified coach, consultant, author, LinkedIn learning instructor, and host of the award-winning Grad School Femtoring podcast. She is also the founder of Grad School Femtoring, LLC, where she helps first-gen BIPOC students and professionals navigate academia and their careers with sustainable productivity strategies. This conversation is especially powerful if you've been praised for being high achievers while quietly burning out behind the scenes. Dr. Yvette shares what sustainable success can actually look like, especially for folks who are neurodivergent, first gen, or carrying the weight of cultural expectations. Let's get into it. What does sustainable success mean to you as a neurodivergent first gen Latina? And how can Latina students do that too, especially in college?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today, Dr. Janice. I'm honored that you reached out so that we could collaborate in this way.
Of course.
I know you've had a chance to introduce me a bit, but I thought I'd share a little bit more about my backstory before diving into the question.
Yeah.
So, in terms of my background, I am a first gen. I am Chicana. I am a mom of two. I was born and raised in a predominantly working class Latina neighborhood in the Northwest San Fernando Valley in Southern California. I was raised by a single mom. She was a single mom with 6 kids. And as the eldest daughter, I took on a lot of responsibilities. I was the first in my family to leave my home, move away from home, to go to college. I set very high standards for myself. I was very high achieving, very perfectionistic, very hard worker, leaned into those values. But what that meant for me is that there were other parts of me that I often had to tame. And that was my sensitivity. I was a theater kid growing up, so I got to express my full range of emotions in the theater space on the stage. And that was a very healing and uplifting space for me. But outside of that, I felt like I had to suppress a lot. I didn't know at the time that I was autistic. I'm late diagnosed. And so what that meant is that I went to college, struggled with culture shock and with my academics, etc., but somehow kind of figured it out, got support, got mentorship, etc. Then went to graduate school. Again, didn't really know about my needs, but I did burn out really, really badly out of not listening to my body. And in not listening to my body, it led to not just burnout, but me developing my first of what would later become several chronic conditions. And these parts of my story are what have shaped the work that I do today. So I'm the founder of Grad School Femtoring, LLC. A lot of people know me as the grad admissions person. But beyond that, my goal is to promote what we're talking about today, which is sustainable success. It's like, how can we reach our goals? How can we live our lives in ways that don't actively harm us? And so, sustainable success, I feel like that's something we can all define for ourselves. For me, it has meant doing work that matters to me without sacrificing my physical, mental, spiritual well being,
Mm.
without sacrificing my cultural values, without sacrificing my overall well being. And that can look like very different things for everyone because we all have different bodies, different brains, different identities and experiences. But for me, it meant unlearning a lot of things. So, unlearning that pressure to overachieve, unlearning, and I'm still a recovering perfectionist. So, unlearning a lot of these tenets of what I would later realize were forms of white supremacy culture.
Mm.
So it was
Mm.
the thinking that I had to do everything on my own, thinking that there was only one right way of doing things, thinking that I had to overachieve, do everything perfectly, even falling into feeling like an imposter and that I wasn't good enough in every space that I entered, especially with my academics, but even in my career, and not realizing maybe the reason why I feel this way is because the system, the space, the environment was not set up for someone like me to
Yeah.
succeed. So, how do
Yeah.
I then change that environment for myself so that I can succeed?
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing with us a little bit about your journey, your different intersecting identities, and also what led you to start to recognize the importance of what sustainable success looks like and recognizing that that can look different for everyone because we're all unique in our own ways. And I think what I'm curious about is you brought up white supremacy and how you recognize that the messaging of white supremacy, if I understood you correctly, is like doing things on your own, working super hard, and, just feeling like an imposter in certain spaces, and then recognizing, like, oh, it's these systems that were not built for someone like me. How did you even get to a point where you asked yourself that question? Because I feel like in my own experiences of like burnout and imposter phenomenon coming up where I question, like, is it me? Is it because Spanish was my first language? Is my Spanish getting in the way of me being able to do my work? Like those questions, I kept putting it on myself until, yeah, I reached a point where I was like, hold up, it's not me, it's the systems. But how did you get to that point where you were able to take a step back and recognize that?
I wish that it could have happened earlier
Mm.
because in college,
Same, same.
I majored in English literature and I thought that I was the problem. I thought
Mm.
that, oh, it's because I don't find this literature of dead white men interesting that was the case. I wish, if I could go back in time, I could have studied Chicana studies. If I could have gone back, maybe studied ethnic studies, maybe even sociology, like where we would learn about societal conditions,
Yeah.
issues, and this might have come up in my courses. It didn't. Even in graduate school, I was in a theater and performance studies program, and we prided ourselves in theory and learning and critical thinking and learning about issues of race and class and gender and sexuality. It was so core to the foundation of the field. Even then, we didn't talk about this directly.
Mm.
So it wasn't until after I got out of graduate school. So it was in like getting involved in collectives. So being part of the Chicana Motherwork Collective, for instance, in graduate school and then beyond graduate school, forming community with other Black and Brown academics,
Mm.
entrepreneurs, who are academicpreneurs or scholarpreneurs. It's these folks that I've been able to talk about this or who have even brought it up
Mm.
or called me in on
Mm.
it when I fall back into it. So
Yeah.
especially for me, that perfectionism, the overworking, I do a lot for other people and that unlearning that my productivity is what makes me valuable, unlearning that my helpfulness makes me valuable because that's how it creeps in. It's
Mm.
not in me wanting to do more. I know that I don't have to do more, but it's in the wanting to help others so that
Yeah.
it creeps in. So yeah, it's been a lot of learning from others and also doing a lot of my own self-learning and
Yeah.
a lot of reflection that this has come up. And this is one of the things that helps me to unlearn is thinking about they're not my tenets, of course, like but thinking about the work of Tema Okun and white supremacy culture that has been really helpful. And then just thinking about things systemically has been especially helpful. So instead of internalizing it, thinking bigger than just me and noticing how
Mm-hmm.
common a lot of these issues are for so many of us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that's so beautiful how you've been able to lean into different communities, different, I'm hearing just colleagues or mentors who have been able to call you in. And I appreciate you saying that because I feel like at first when I didn't even know what calling in meant. Like I used to just be like, "Oh, we need to call them out." And then it's just like, "Oh, but we can do that in a gentle way that's still honoring how all of us are still learning and unlearning stuff and like it's an ongoing journey where we're trying to not overwork ourselves or trying to release some of that perfectionism, but then like you said, what sometimes will creep us back into that is when we're really leaning into wanting to help others. And honestly, like as a somebody who's in a helping career, I've often burned out. And when I think about those burnout moments, it's when I've tried to go above and beyond to help others.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of us were taught to push through. We're not taught
Yeah.
to rest.
Yeah.
Sometimes, rest is equated with being lazy. And just
Mm-hmm.
FYI, I don't believe in laziness.
Mm-hmm.
But that's hard. It's hard to unlearn that and to recognize that actually in resting and slowing down and doing less, that allows us to keep doing this work in the long haul. So
Mm.
instead of thinking that it means that we can't, that it limits our ability to help others, when you think in the long haul, it's actually expanding that
Yeah.
possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, for the sustainable success.
Right.
Definitely. Could you talk to me more about what you mean when you say that you don't believe in that term lazy?
Yes, so this is where the neurodivergence piece of our conversation comes in because I come from a neurodivergent family. Some of us are diagnosed, some of us are undiagnosed. And so there is autism, there's ADHD, there is bipolar disorder in the family. And even beyond that, a lot of the clients that I serve, they come to me because they feel seen and heard, and they too are neurodivergent, and they need support in doing the work in ways that work for them in their brain. But I've witnessed even like in my own household, in my childhood growing up, how for some of us, getting up and getting things done, even things like how to keep things tidy,
Mm-hmm.
it came easier to some of us than others.
Mm.
And so I'm like, if only we had recognized that it was a challenge and a difference, and we had accommodated that those individuals, then we wouldn't have been calling them lazy. Then they would have been able to, yeah, to receive the support that they needed. And it actually, what's funny? I was listening to one of your episodes before our recording because
I was doing the same with yours.
I love that. So I
Yeah,
love to do that. I love to like listen to episodes if I come on a podcast just to familiarize myself
for
with it.
sure. I appreciate that.
And of course, like just to offer support, right? But I
Yeah.
was listening to the episode with where you interviewed, I believe his name was Toomey, the Black dyspraxic, and he
Mm-hmm.
mentioned something that stood out to me a lot about this question of like diagnosis and early diagnosis, because a lot of us that are late diagnosed, we always think the what if, oh, what if we had received an earlier diagnosis? And there's this assumption that with early diagnosis, you're going to have access to more resources, more support, and ideally like fewer limitations. You'll be able to do more with it. And in his own experience, from what I remember, he was saying that even with early diagnosis, there is no guarantee. It's what you do with it. It's what you do with
Yeah.
that information. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with even this idea of like redefining laziness as maybe that person that is lazy is honoring their need for rest. Maybe
Mm.
they have a capacity
Mm.
that is less than what others have capacity for. Maybe they
Yeah.
need extra help. Maybe they need extra supports, etc. What would happen if we redefine that and if we use that knowledge to better support one another?
Mm, yeah, for sure, for sure. I agree with you. I think that I remember to me saying that for sure that like once you get a diagnosis, if you get it as a child or like early on in life, it's about what do you do with that, right?
Hmm.
And when you bring up this label of being lazy, and what I'm hearing is being able to recognize like how do we approach people with curiosity rather than with that judgment.
Right, right.
Because when we're very quick to judge of like they can't, why aren't they doing it, and instead we don't ask like what do you need help with, or how can I help support you so that we can get you to
Hmm.
do this thing that we're waiting on, then it creates a conversation rather than shame.
Hmm.
And that's something that comes up a lot with neurodivergent folks, especially when I think about the ADHD communities. There's so much shame of
Yeah.
like, I'm not working hard enough. I'm not reaching my fullest potential. I just need to figure out like how to stop being lazy. I need to be more productive, more self sufficient, and so much pressure. And these old narratives or these old stories that people will say to others without knowing that there's a diagnosis, or maybe they know that there's a diagnosis and they're like, you're using it as an excuse when it's not an excuse. Sometimes yeah, there's challenges. Everybody has different challenges. And how do we provide that support or
Yeah.
accommodations? I think is that key difference.
Yeah. The other thing that comes up for me when you're talking about that is how, with that shame, sometimes it comes from individuals placing a moral value on
Mm,
how you live your life and on what
mm,
you can do and how you, even things like how you keep your house
mm.
together.
Yeah.
And with, one of the things that has also helped me, again, with the unlearning is I think about the work of someone like Casey Davis. I believe she wrote a book called How to Keep House While Drowning. And I remember when I read the book, what stood out to me was how she focuses on a house being functional versus a house being perfectly tidy, perfectly clean, presentable. It's really about resetting the space. Like
Mm,
once the space gets to a point where we can't live in the space, where it's not functioning, then we got to reset it.
mm,
And so for her, the resetting, they just do it in a way that works for their family. But I remember thinking that because I used to carry a lot of shame and not invite people over because of the same reason, because I had this expectation of like, every time someone comes, you clean, you tidy. I grew up with that. I don't know
mm.
about you all in your houses, but if that was how it was at my house, that was how it was at my
Yeah.
nana's house. Like with everything, it was like, oh, you have company over, you better make it look like it's spotless and then make it look like it was so effortless too.
Right. Or like make it look like nobody lives here.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes, that too. Because when I see, that's the other thing. Sometimes I see things on the floor. And it's my kids. I have two kids. I have a 4-year-old and I have an 11-year-old.
Mhm.
And so I'll see my 4-year-old's toy on the floor, and yeah, sometimes I might shake my head like, there you go, more toys. But then sometimes I stop myself and I'm like, oh, this is a sign that it's a lived-in home.
Yeah.
And yeah, what if you yeah, started to change your expectations around how your home is supposed to look like. I don't think it's supposed to look like nobody is there all of the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
My husband
definitely.
used to make fun of me because I used to have these expectations of if I could live on my own and I didn't live with my messy husband and I didn't have kids, I would have a Marie Kondo house. And there's this meme of the Marie Kondo of like this is the perfect Marie Kondo house and it's empty. Like it's literally
Yeah.
just a picture of a house with nothing in it.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so my husband would make fun of me and be like, "This is your perfect home, like literally empty with no one in it,
An empty room.
empty room with nothing."
Sleep on the floor. No kitchen utensils. You're not eating today.
Needless to say, I'm no longer like that but every once in a while I might have to check myself because every once in a while it does creep in, especially
Mm.
when company comes, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. I definitely grew up like that too. I think when it comes to having company over, we care about making it welcoming and, people feeling comfortable. And, I think to a certain extent, having an organized space can help with like just feeling
Yeah.
less stressed. But yeah, being flexible with what does that
Hmm.
look like and feeling okay that when your guest comes and it's not, as clean as you would like, that hopefully the guest that you have coming over isn't judging you like that, because if they
Right.
are judging you, then maybe that's more of a conversation to have of like, who is this person trying to judge a place that they don't live in?
Right. Right.
Not that you have to
Yeah.
get all defensive, right? I feel like I was starting to get a little attitude when I said that.
Yeah, sounds like you have some of that experience as well.
Yeah, I growing up, especially for the new year,
Hmm.
I was taught to always have a clean home. Everything is
Mm,
washed, all the laundry is done before you ring in at midnight. And so I still hold that tradition till this day, but I'm trying to be more flexible with like, it's okay that I didn't do my laundry. Like, I can do it
yeah.
tomorrow, January 1st. Like, it is just another day.
Hmm.
But it is a tradition, I think, of just wanting to ring in that new year, I guess, like organized and clean and fresh.
Yeah.
But I definitely wouldn't want it to turn into like this rigidity of like
Hmm.
black and white, of like it either has to be 100% clean.
Yeah.
Like, not only did I have to vacuum, but I also had to mop. Like, if I just vacuumed and it's almost midnight, I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of the concept of good enough, of like, well,
Yes.
what would a good enough clean home look like for me? And
Hmm.
that comes up a lot for me and for a lot of the people that I work with who may be spoonies. They might have chronic conditions, they may be neurodivergent, and they are working with less, like less time, less capacity. And so what do you do when you physically, like literally don't have as much time as everyone else around you?
Yep.
Then something's got to give. And sometimes it can help to just think to yourself, instead of comparing myself and trying to do everything the way other people do it, what would my good enough version of it look like? Similar to the house of like, the house needs to be functional, needs to be reset. It doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Could you share a little bit about what you mean when you said spoony?
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for drawing attention to that because I always, this is again because of the communities I'm part of. I work under the assumption that people are familiar with this term, but not everybody may be. So
Mhm.
the term spoonie comes from the concept of the spoon theory,
Mhm.
which comes from the chronic illness community.
Mm.
So in the chronic illness community, there's this common concept around how those of us that have chronic illnesses or chronic conditions, we have, figuratively speaking, fewer spoons to use throughout the day. So if the spoons represents energy,
Mm.
then we might start with fewer spoons than someone who may not have a chronic condition and may have either more spoons or an unlimited number of spoons that they can use. Again, tying it to the energy that it takes to function and to get things done throughout the day. And so if you're starting with three, four, five spoons and someone has a dozen or more spoons,
Mm.
then you have to be very, very intentional with how you use your spoons. So
Yeah.
that might mean maybe today you might not have the energy for a shower. Maybe today you might not have the energy to work a certain number of hours a day. So then what do you have the energy for? And what is the most important thing to get done today? And sometimes the most important thing is basic needs and survival, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing more on the spoon theory, because it allows us to understand that we're all showing up with a different level of energy, but then it also allows us to reflect on how, especially when you think about chronic illnesses, for some folks it is like ADHD, for example, is an invisible disability. And so
Mm-hmm.
like just because somebody doesn't physically show that they're low energy, it doesn't mean that they have your same level of energy. And it can be so hard,
Right.
especially when you're at a like Monday through Friday 9 to 5 and you're just expected to show up 9 to 5, do as everybody else, when we're not all the same and we don't all have the same number of spoons.
Right.
And so I really think that it's so helpful to think about that. Like, how many spoons are you waking up with today?
Mm-hmm.
And readjusting expectations on what's going to be your priority. Because I think
Yeah.
often we can be very ambitious of like, these are all the things I want to do today. And this is what I'm going to get done at this time, this time, this time. And if you don't wake up with that energy to be able to do those, then it means just moving things around and being okay with like, okay, these things don't have to get done today, but what can I do today? And being okay with not getting it all done.
Yeah. I've noticed that a lot of the folks that I've worked with that also happen to have chronic illnesses,
Mm,
it's been just a common observation. A lot of them will want to work under this assumption of ideal conditions. So they
mm,
work and they expect to work under the ideal, which is maybe when they're at their baseline. So they baseline symptoms, they are not flaring up, so they're not feeling too bad. They have more energy. And again, ideal conditions. Life is not happening. Stuff isn't hitting the fan. And life is not like that, even for those of us who are not disabled. Like, just life happens sometimes. And so,
mm-hmm.
this, what you're talking about, like, it doesn't, maybe you have less energy. It doesn't have to be this or that. How can you add more flexibility into it? That's one of the ways to promote sustainable success is to build in more flexibility, to be more compassionate with yourself. Because if you
Yeah.
don't do it, no one else is going to do that for you either.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your personal story, but also your expertise in the work that you do. And so, what I'm hearing is when it comes to sustainable success, that looks different for everyone. And when it comes to sustainable success, thinking about those intersecting identities and how that may also be important to consider when you're recognizing the types of decisions you're making, right? So, like you brought up the white supremacy pillars. And so, recognizing how are those showing up in your life? How are you creeping back into that, maybe those old patterns of perfectionism or sacrificing so many areas of your life, like your cultural values or your well being. And I think when we can reflect on those different areas, then we are able to start to create more sustainable success for ourselves. Did I get that right? Is there
That
anything else you'd like to add?
No, I love it. That was so spot on. Yeah,
Oh,
this was wonderful.
yay, I listened. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate you spending our time with us to share a little more about yourself. What is some ways that people can find you?
Yes, so you can reach me on socials. I'm on Instagram. I am also on LinkedIn. So on Instagram, it's Grad School Femtoring. On LinkedIn, you can find me through my name, Yvette Martinez-Vu. And the other thing too is I want to encourage you. I have an episode, and let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. If
Mhm.
you want to hear more about this kind of work on my podcast, it is, give me a second because I am searching for it right now. I had pulled it up and then I lost it. Oh, it's episode 301. So episode 301 on 5 gentle productivity tips for chronic illness, autism, and ADHD. If you vibe with what we talked about today, then you are definitely going to enjoy that episode.
Nice. Thank you so much. That's episode 301. That's also the area code for Maryland. So I'm definitely
Wow.
gonna know that that is the episode I gotta tune into, and I'll make sure to have your contact information in the show notes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. What a powerful conversation. Big thank you to Dr. Yvette Martinez-Vu for keeping it real and reminding us that success doesn't mean you have to burn out, especially for folks navigating ADHD, first gen pressure, or cultural expectations. If you've been chasing goals, chasing your dreams, but feeling drained, you're not alone. You deserve a version of success that's sustainable, not just impressive on paper. So I'll leave you with this question: what does sustainable success mean to you? Let it sit, journal about it, talk about it with somebody that you feel comfortable with, or maybe you talk about it with yourself out loud. Do you ever talk to yourself out loud sometimes? Because I know I do. It helps. Gracias for being here with me on Latina ADHD. If this episode resonated, share it with somebody who you know would want to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit that follow button, that subscribe button, so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, cuídate mucho, and remember, rest is your divine right.